Right now, floating inside the muscle mass of a 100-ton whale, buried deep near its tail, are the completely useless leftover bones of hind legs.
Yeah, which is just wild to think about. Evolution didn't design the whale to be some, perfect fish.
Right. It just took a land mammal, gave it a really poor disguise, and sent it back into the ocean.
Exactly. And honestly, it completely shatters the illusion we usually have about the natural world. I mean, usually when you walk into a natural history museum, there's this feeling of like separation.
Yeah, you are the modern observer, standing safely behind the glass.
Right, looking at these ancient, bizarre relics of a world that has completely vanished. The fossils are over there, and you are over here.
But when you uncover facts like those whale bones, the glass just breaks. You realize you aren't just observing the museum, you actually are the museum.
Yeah, your everyday body is literally a walking, breathing exhibit.
Full of ancient, jury-rigged innovations that were patched together millions, sometimes billions of years ago.
You stop being the pristine end goal of history. You start seeing yourself as just the latest, heavily modified model rolling off an assembly line that's been running nonstop for 4 billion years, using whatever spare parts happen to be lying around.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are looking at a fascinating, really expansive transcript from the YouTube channel Drift and Discover.
Yeah, it's structured as a sprawling historical narrative. It's designed to walk you through the entire history of life on Earth.
We're going to map out this astonishing, chaotic, and totally nonlinear journey of evolutionary history. We want to show you how life went from microscopic loners to the complex thinking being that is listening to this right now.
Focusing specifically on the how and the why, because getting from a single cell to a human being, it isn't a straight line. It is a messy series of arms races, incredibly awkward transitions, and, well, happy accidents.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how you got here, we first have to understand how life scaled up in the first place. For a huge chunk of Earth's history, life was just single-celled organisms.
Microscopic loners.
I always picture early single-celled life like a bunch of solo startup founders. They are all running their own tiny businesses, doing everything themselves, digesting nutrients, moving around, sensing light.
Right, but eventually they realize they can only really grow if they merge into a massive corporation and assign different departments to specialize.
But why couldn't they just grow bigger on their own? Like, why force a merger?
Because physics strictly forbids it. If you are a single cell, physics is your ultimate boundary. You can only grow so large before your surface area to volume ratio basically limits you.
Okay, so how does that work?
Imagine a water balloon. As you fill it, the inside volume increases much faster than the rubber surface area outside. For a cell, that surface area is how it absorbs food and oxygen.
Oh, I see.
So if it gets too big, the surface just can't bring in enough nutrients to keep the massive inside alive. Staying microscopic is mandatory unless you team up.
Teaming up sounds like an obvious win, but the sources emphasize there was a massive catch to forming that biological corporation.
The ultimate catch, really. To form a multicellular organism, the individual cells had to surrender their ability to reproduce independently.
Why?
That is the greatest trust exercise in the history of biology. They had to subordinate their individual reproduction to the collective success of the colony.
If you want to see what that early, simple, cooperative state looked like, you just have to look at a sponge.
Exactly. Modern sponges are essentially organized colonies of cells filtering water. They don't have brains or hearts, but they have a division of labor.
Some cells pump water, some capture food, some build a structure.
But you can't run a massive corporate headquarters without premium electricity. And for billions of years, the ocean was filled with these ancient photosynthetic microbes called cyanobacteria.
They're capturing sunlight and releasing oxygen as waste, just dumping this highly reactive gas into the water.
For a very long time, that oxygen didn't do much for the atmosphere. It was immediately absorbed by iron and sulfur sinks in the environment.
It essentially rusted the oceans.
It did. But once those chemical sinks filled up, the reactive materials were totally oxidized. This toxic waste gas oxygen finally began to bubble up and fill the water in the atmosphere.
Which completely changed the biological economy.
Oh, absolutely. Oxygen allows for incredibly efficient metabolism. Anaerobic respiration, like living without oxygen, is like running a car on terrible low-grade fuel.
You can putter along, but you can't do any heavy lifting.
Complex life needs massive amounts of energy. Active movement, hunting, processing thoughts in a brain that is biologically expensive machinery.
And oxygen metabolism produces far more energy. It was the premium fuel that allowed bodies to break out of the microscopic world and grow large.
Think about how that ancient decision is operating inside you right now. You are a cooperative of trillions of cells.
Right. Every cell in your body carries the exact same DNA manual, but they express entirely different chapters based on chemical signaling and their position in your body.
Your heart cells, lung cells, immune cells, they are all trusting the system, working together without your conscious oversight, powered by that oxygen fuel.
The biological foundation was set. They had the energy, and they had the team structure. The next massive hurdle was architectural. How do you actually build a moving body?
That's where things get complicated.
Yeah, I was looking at the sources regarding this architectural phase,
Yes.
specifically the Ediacaran period, and I'm a bit lost.
It's a tough period to study.
The sources mentioned these were the earliest animals, basically soft-bodied, frond-like, quilted creatures. But then it says we hardly know anything about them because the fossils are so rare. Why is it so hard to find evidence of them?
Soft tissue is incredibly fragile. When a soft-bodied creature dies, its flesh gets consumed by bacteria or scattered by scavengers in a matter of days.
They just vanish.
Ray, pretty much.
Yeah.
To fossilize something without bones, you need a miraculous set of circumstances. You need rapid burial in a completely anoxic environment.
Meaning zero oxygen, so bacteria can't eat it.
Right, zero oxygen. And then you need geological stability in that exact spot for hundreds of millions of years. It almost never happens.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because right after that soft-bodied era, the sources talk about a period 539 million years ago called the Cambrian explosion.
Ah, the Cambrian explosion.
They claim most major animal groups suddenly appeared in the fossil record in a rapid 10 million year window. Wait, I'm looking at the timeline in the sources, and this is making no sense to me.
How so?
We just established evolution is a slow, jury-rigged crawl. So how are they claiming life just suddenly exploded into all these complex forms in a geological blink of an eye? That contradicts the whole premise.
It sounds contradictory until you realize what actually exploded. It wasn't necessarily an explosion of life. It was an explosion of fossil-friendly armor.
Oh, so they were already there.
Exactly. This is the period when animals figured out how to extract minerals from the seawater to build hard parts, like shells, spikes, and exoskeletons.
So the lineages existed, they were just soft and invisible to the fossil record.
Yes, molecular evidence strongly suggests these animal lineages originated much earlier, slowly diversifying in the dark. Once they put on armor, the rock record suddenly lit up with their remains.
They invented biological hardware, and suddenly they left a permanent footprint. And underneath that armor, they were establishing the absolute basics of how a body works. The biggest one being the tube within a tube digestive system.
Prior to this, many simple animals just had a single gastric sac. Food goes in the one opening, gets digested, and waste goes out that exact same opening.
Which is horrifying.
Highly inefficient, too. The tube within a tube innovation created a one-way street, mouth to anus.
The brilliance of a one-way street is that you can set up specialized assembly line stations along the path.
Right, you develop a stomach specifically for breaking things down with acid, and then intestines further down specifically for absorbing nutrients.
And that one-way digestive street also dictated how bodies were shaped. You have radial symmetry, like jellyfish or sea anemones, arranged around a central axis like a wheel.
Great if you are just drifting passively. But a wheel doesn't know which way's forward.
Exactly. If you want to actively pursue a target, you need bilateral symmetry, left and right mirror images, with a defined top, bottom, front, and back.
And that structural choice leads to arguably the most important evolutionary strategy for animals, cephalization.
I love this concept. Front-loading.
Cephalization is the concentration of your sensory organs and your process center, your rudimentary brain at the front of your body.
Think about the physics of moving through an environment. You want to evaluate a space before your entire body enters it.
Exactly. So you cluster your eyes, your antennae, your chemical receptors at the absolute leading edge.
That allows you to detect food or danger immediately, with the shortest possible signal delay to the brain located right behind those sensors.
Putting all those sensors at the front of a mobile body turned animals into devastating hunters. Suddenly, you can track things.
And the moment something starts actively hunting, the prey has to adapt to survive. The biological problem of being eaten naturally causes the evolutionary solution of extreme defenses. It kicks off a brutal, billion-year arms race.
Predation is the ultimate driver of complex traits. Consider the evolution of vision. It didn't start as a camera eye.
It started as a simple patch of cells that could just detect light versus dark.
Then that patch deepened into a cup shape, which allowed the animal to determine the direction of the light. Then a lens evolved to focus the light into an image.
Predators evolved sharper vision to track prey from a distance. That forced prey to evolve wider peripheral vision to spot the predators coming.
It's a constant loop. If you can't see them coming or you can't run away, you need physical defenses.
Some lineages traded their speed for heavy shells or chieftain armor, becoming walking fortresses. Others opted for camouflage, disappearing into the background, which is a great trick, but only works if you stay completely still.
And then there are warning colors. High contrast reds and yellows screaming, "I am toxic, do not eat me."
This arms race reveals a fascinating quirk about how evolution operates across different species. We see a phenomenon called convergent evolution.
Venom is the perfect example of that. Venom didn't just evolve once in a single common ancestor. It evolved entirely independently in snakes, spiders, cone snails, scorpions, and jellyfish.
Completely different lineages facing the same problem, how to subdue prey or deter a predator, and they stumbled upon the exact same chemical warfare solution.
It is brilliant, but we need to pause and look at the engine driving all this. Evolution is not a master engineer.
Not at all. If evolution were a human engineer, it would be fired for gross incompetence. It is the ultimate jury rigger. I mean, look at the recurrent laryngeal nerve.
That is the classic proof of evolutionary baggage.
It's a nerve that connects your brain to your voice box. In a logical engineered body, that nerve would just travel the 2 inches straight down your neck.
But it doesn't.
No. It goes down your neck, plunges deep into your chest, loops all the way around the aorta of your heart, and then travels back up your neck to your throat. In a giraffe, that nerve makes a ridiculous 15-foot detour down the neck and back up just to connect 2 things that are inches apart. Why on earth would it do that?
Because of the fish we evolved from. In our fish ancestors, that nerve connected the brain to the gills, and it passed behind a blood vessel near the heart. It was a straight, efficient line.
Oh, that makes sense.
But over millions of years, as bodies elongated and necks evolved, the heart moved lower in the chest. Evolution couldn't just cut the nerve and reroute it, it had to stretch it.
So the nerve got dragged all the way down into the chest, permanently looping around that blood vessel.
Which proves evolution only solves local, immediate problems using whatever is already on hand.
But the sources list 4 main forces that drive this: mutation, natural selection, genetic drift, and gene flow. How do those actually work together to stretch a nerve or build a shell?
Let's break the mechanics down. Mutation provides the raw material. It is a literal copying error in the DNA, creating a brand new trait.
Most mutations do nothing, some are fatal, but occasionally one is useful.
Natural selection is the environment acting as an editor. If that new mutation helps you survive longer to reproduce, it gets passed on.
Survival of the fittest. But what about genetic drift? The source is treated as completely separate from natural selection.
Genetic drift is survival of the luckiest. Imagine a population of green and brown beetles. Natural selection would be a bird eating the green ones because they stand out against the dirt.
Yeah, okay, that tracks.
But genetic drift is someone accidentally stepping on the only brown beetles just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is random chance permanently altering the gene pool, completely regardless of how fit the animal is.
Wow. And then gene flow.
Gene flow is just migration, new genes walking into a population when an outsider joins the herd.
Working together, those 4 forces just blindly tinker. And a lot of the time, the tinkering fails. Over 99% of all species that have ever lived are extinct.
It is a staggering failure rate. But that relentless pressure is what forces massive transitions.
Eventually, the oceans became so fiercely competitive, so full of armored predators and venomous hunters, that some lineages looked at the completely barren alien environment above the waves and made the ultimate leap.
The transition to land.
Which, if you think about it from the perspective of a fish, sounds like a terrible idea. The biological problem of leaving the water seems insurmountable.
It was a physical nightmare. In the water, an animal is buoyant, gravity barely matters. On land, you are suddenly crushed by unmediated gravity. You have to invent structural support.
You also have to extract oxygen from thin air instead of filtering it from water.
And most dangerously, you have to prevent your own moisture from evaporating into the air. If you dry out, your cells die.
The sources outline the sequence of who made the jump. Plants and fungi did it first, around 500 million years ago. which makes sense because someone had to go up there and build the ecosystem, creating the oxygen and the food base.
Then the arthropods followed, like the millipedes and early spiders. They had a massive advantage because their waterproof exoskeletons were prepackaged spacesuits.
The armor supported their weight against gravity and sealed their moisture in. But what about our ancestors, the vertebrates?
Vertebrates had a much clunkier process. We transition via a specific group called lobe-finned fish.
This absolutely blows my mind. The sources say these fish had lungs and limb-like fins before they ever left the water.
It's true.
It's like humanity inventing an incredibly complex, pressurized spacesuit just to go clean out a dusty basement, and only a million years later realizing, hey, we can use this suit to go to the moon.
It is the perfect illustration of how traits are repurposed. Those heavy, muscular fins didn't evolve for walking on dry land. They evolved because those specific fish lived in shallow, incredibly muddy, choked swamps where normal swimming didn't work.
They needed thick fins to push through the debris.
Right, and the lungs. They didn't evolve for breathing fresh air on a mountain. They evolved because those swamp pools were stagnant, warm, and severely depleted of oxygen.
Gills just weren't enough.
So they developed a pocket in their gut to gulp air from the surface just to survive the swamp.
The tools existed before the dryland environment ever demanded them. So these early tetrapods, these four-limbed vertebrates, drag themselves out of the mud.
Yeah.
But they're still trapped.
Amphibians, like frogs, conquer the land, but they are tethered on a short leash to the water.
They have to go back to the pond to lay their jelly-like eggs, or the eggs will dry out and die. And their larvae, the tadpoles, are entirely aquatic.
You cannot leap directly from a fish to a fully terrestrial animal. Species have to endure these millions of years of awkward intermediate stages. They are highly inefficient, vulnerable in the water to fast predators, and clumsy on land.
The biological problem was how to reproduce without a pond. And the evolutionary solution was an absolute masterpiece, the amniotic egg.
The amniotic egg freed vertebrates from the water entirely. Think of it as a biological Apollo capsule, a miniaturized space station life support system.
How does a shell act like a space station?
You have an engineering paradox. You need a hull that keeps the vacuum of space out, or in this case, dry, lethal air, so the embryo doesn't desiccate.
But a solid wall means the embryo suffocates.
Exactly. So the egg features a semi-permeable leathery or calcified shell. It allows microscopic oxygen molecules to slip in and carbon dioxide waste to slip out while locking the larger water molecules inside.
That is genius.
Inside this hull, you have the amnion, a sac holding the embryo in a private portable ocean. You have the allantois, which acts as a dedicated waste management system, safely storing toxic byproducts away from the baby.
And the yolk sac provides a prepackaged food supply.
With that portable pond, true colonization of the land began. Deserts, mountains, deep forests, everything was suddenly accessible because you didn't need to walk back to a swamp to give birth.
And with the whole world open, the evolutionary tree went completely wild. First of all, the sources clarify a massive misconception. I always assumed humans, as mammals, evolved from reptiles or early dinosaurs.
That's a common misconception.
But the sources mention we evolved from a completely different line called synapsids. What exactly is a synapsid?
Long before the dinosaurs existed, the early animals that laid those amniotic eggs split into two distinct branches. One branch led to the reptiles and eventually dinosaurs. The other branch was the synapsids.
What do they look like?
They looked a bit like bulky mammal-like reptiles. Over millions of years, this synapsid lineage took a very different survival path. They developed hair for insulation, they evolved glands to produce milk for their young, and crucially, they developed endothermy.
Warm-bloodedness.
Yes, generating your own internal body heat. Now, endothermy is biologically exhausting. You have to eat constantly to fuel the furnace.
A warm-blooded animal needs vastly more food than a reptile of the same size.
But the advantage is immense. A reptile is sluggish at night or in the cold. A warm-blooded synapsid can hunt in the freezing dark at top speed.
But even with a built-in furnace, our mammal ancestors were basically just small, nocturnal snacks for a very long time.
That's true.
Because that other branch, the reptiles, produced the dinosaurs, and they absolutely dominated the planet for 160 million years. Mammals only exploded in size and diversity after the asteroid hit and wiped the big dinosaurs out.
But the text is very clear that the dinosaurs aren't actually gone.
Right. Birds are literal surviving theropod dinosaurs. They belong to the exact same evolutionary group as Tyrannosaurus rex and Velociraptor.
And just like the fish using lungs in a swamp, the defining trait of birds, the feathers, evolved for completely different reasons first.
Feathers weren't for flying.
Initially, no. Early dinosaur feathers were essentially just fuzz. They likely evolved for thermal insulation or for visual display to attract mates, just like a peacock uses its tail today.
Oh, wow.
Only millions of years later, when some small dinosaurs started leaping between trees or gliding, were those display feathers modified into stiff aerodynamic tools for powered flight.
And powered flight is such an incredible survival hack that evolution invented it 4 separate times across completely different lineages. Insects did it first, then the pterosaurs, then the dinosaurs turned into birds, and finally mammals did it with bats.
But the craziest part is how quickly evolution will throw that superpower away.
If a bird makes it to an isolated island where there are no ground predators, like New Zealand or Antarctica, it will ditch the ability to fly almost immediately. Penguins, kiwis, ostriches.
It comes back to the biological economy. Flapping wings against gravity is the most metabolically expensive activity an animal can do.
If you are on an island with no wolves or cats, flying is a massive waste of energy.
Evolution ruthlessly cuts costs. If a trait isn't actively keeping you alive, it gets defunded and eventually lost.
So what does this all mean? It means progress isn't a straight line marching toward perfection. Sometimes progress means going backward. Look at whales.
The ultimate backward step.
Whales are land mammals that spent millions of years evolving legs, lungs, and warm blood, only to look at the land and say, you know what, let's go back. Around 50 million years ago, a wolf-like mammal waded into the shallows and eventually returned to the sea entirely. They are essentially mammals cosplaying as fish.
Because the physics of moving through water demands a streamlined torpedo shape, natural selection ruthlessly sculpted them to look like fish. But underneath that blubber, they are bound by their terrestrial past.
They still breathe air and can drown. They still nurse their young with milk.
And we mentioned those vestigial hind leg bones floating in their tail muscles. Evolution didn't remove the legs, it just shrank them until they were hidden inside the body.
The blowhole is my favorite example of this jury-rigging.
Yeah.
A blowhole isn't a new breathing organ. It is literally just a pair of mammalian nostrils that, over millions of years, slowly migrated from the front of the snout up between the eyes and settled on the top of the skull so the whale wouldn't have to lift its whole head to breathe. It is profoundly weird.
You see these extreme stretched modifications everywhere once you know to look for them. Giraffes have the exact same number of neck vertebrae as humans, 7.
Evolution didn't give them more bones, it just massively elongated the ones that were already there.
An elephant's trunk isn't a new limb. It is a fusion of the upper lip and the nose, stretched out and packed with 40,000 muscles, capable of picking up a single peanut or tearing down a tree.
Evolution just stretches, fuses, and modifies existing parts to solve local problems. And that exact same stretching and modifying is what eventually forced our ancestors out of the trees. Which brings us to human evolution.
The final twist.
Another massive plot twist. We did not descend from chimpanzees. We share a common ancestor with modern apes from about 6 to 7 million years ago, and our lineage just branched off in a different direction.
A direction heavily influenced by a very specific repurposed trait, the opposable thumb.
We think of the thumb as the ultimate tool-wielding adaptation, but it evolved millions of years before tools, just so early primates could firmly grasp tree branches.
We took a tree climbing grip, stepped out onto the savanna, and used it to hold a stone tool, and that created the most explosive feedback loop in history.
Better grasping allowed for better tools.
Figuring out how to make better tools required more intelligence, which favored individuals with slightly bigger brains.
Bigger brains allowed for fire and cooking, which provided massive calories to fuel even bigger brains.
The environment changed our bodies, and then we used our bodies to change the environment, accelerating until we're building rocket ships and sitting in studios recording deep dives.
Which brings us fully back to where we started. You, listening to this right now, are a continuous, unbroken chain of survival successes stretching back 4 billion years.
Every single one of your ancestors, every fish, every early mammal hiding from a dinosaur, every ape on the savanna, survived just long enough against impossible odds to pass the baton.
You are a modified ape, which is a modified mammal, which is a modified tetrapod, which is a modified fish.
And your body is proving it at this exact moment. Your tailbone is a leftover from a lost tail. Your appendix is a leftover from a different ancestral diet.
The recurrent laryngeal nerve leaping around your heart is a remnant of your fish gills. You are a walking museum carrying the baggage of deep time.
You are not the end of the line. You are just the current temporary expression of all those ancient environments.
And that leaves us with one final kind of mind-bending thought to prog on. We know 99% of all species eventually go extinct, and our human bodies are just temporary jury-rigged vessels carrying ancient baggage.
So think about the environment we live in now.
We spend our lives sitting rigidly in chairs, bathed in blue lights, staring at glowing screens, processing absolutely massive amounts of rapid-fire digital information. It's an environment totally alien to our hunter-gatherer biology.
It really is.
What future biological leftovers might our distant descendants carry forward from our modern, screen-lit, technology-driven era? What bizarre adaptations are slowly being hardwired into our blueprint right now? Just something to think about the next time you look in the mirror.